Whoops. Hello, everyone. Sarah here. I am going to make sure that this video is getting shared out to all of the appropriate places. So while I do that, I invite you to sit down, make yourself comfortable. Yes, even you can make yourself comfortable, Midori. Yes, I know. It's live stream time. I have with me tonight tea instead of coffee because I'm trying to get better at this whole sleeping thing. Oh, okay, good. That's good. Thanks. Thank you, Midori. No, you cannot have this water. Okay. Things are going really well. This is great. Okay. Hello to all of you who are popping in for tonight's live stream. Okay. Hello, Jeremy. I'm glad you're here. I'm trying to keep this water away from my cat because she will put her face in it and try to drink it. Hello, Tim. Hello, Kevin. I'm glad you're here. I'm going to go ahead and... Yes. Oh, goodbye. Okay. All right. There we go. Okay. We're going to share this over to the podcasting group. Wonderful, wonderful. All right. I hope that you are indeed making yourself quite comfortable. We're going to do a little bit of a creator chat tonight, which I'm really excited about. There we go. Okay. 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 So Midori is out of my office. She'll probably be back, but she's out of my office. There's lots of nice loud planes going by outside. So this is just perfect for a podcasting live stream. I'm happy to see you all here today. I have a lot of podcast stuff going on. I've got my beautiful hot, delicious rainbow alchemy mug that was made for me by Tamara Parliament, who plays Thor in Girl in Space. This was a birthday gift, and I'm so delighted by it. Thank you, Tamara. And I also have my Support Indie Podcasts hoodie going on today. Yeah, that's real loud out there. I'm assuming you can't hear it because I'm using the mic on my laptop. So anyway, a loud plane going by. If any of you are members of the Podcast Junkie Discord, or if you follow Podcast Junkie or Cast Junkie, I think he's just now called, on Twitter, that's where I got this awesome hoodie. Love supporting indie podcasts. So, yeah, let me know how you're doing tonight. Like I said, I'm drinking tea in an attempt to sleep better. So we as creators, I think, often need to get a little bit better at taking care of ourselves. And part of taking good care of yourself is getting this thing that people call sleep. So she's back. Hi. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Okay. So Midori is back. She is after this water. There we go. Okay. So I have a few questions that came in that I wanted to cover for tonight's live stream. Yeah. And the first was emailed to me. Let's see. And I think that he said I can share his name. I don't know if any of you know Davis Walden, who is one of my absolute favorite indie podcasters. He runs an audio drama called The Viridian Wilds, which you should check out. It's amazing and wonderful. Davis is still a college student, I think. I guess not that that's relevant in any way, shape, or form. But Davis sent me an email that really resonated with me, and I think will resonate with a lot of you podcasters out there. And so I'm just going to read this question that he sent, and we're going to talk about it a little bit and talk about some of the things that it brings up about being a podcast creator and about what it means to find joy and fulfillment in what you're creating. So Davis says, "Hi, Sarah. I wanted to ask you how it is possible to get past submission and publication pessimism and cynicism. I enjoy writing and creating worlds and crafting characters that people have the potential to care about, but so much of it is sending out into the void and not receiving much of feedback in terms of what I am doing. I thought that writing The Viridian Wild would allow for me to feel some satisfaction and pride in having crafted a project of that size, but what instead happened was that I feel competitive, envious, and insecure about where I'm standing in the world. I feel like writing is more of what I'm meant to do than anything else I've done, but it feels as if my work is a tree falling in a forest with no one around. Okay. Yes. Midori is now, I don't know if you can see this, directly right here. That's fine. We're cool. One thing people don't know about me is that I love cats. Okay, people do know that about me. What they don't know, I am very allergic to cats. And so I'm just going to get some hives going during tonight's live stream. It's going to be amazing. You are being very pushy tonight. Okay, so we've had a few people join us. Hello, Jesse. Kevin says that Kevin has met Davis at Podtails. Yes, Davis is a very cool individual. And I'd love to know in the comments if any part of that resonated with you, if any part of Davis's email resonated with you. So again, he's talking about getting past submission and publication pessimism and cynicism. So in other words, the feeling that, hey, I made this thing because I love it. And that's, I think, the core reason why most of us get into podcasting in the first place. And it's kind of inevitable that when we create things, we also, in addition to creating the thing itself, we create expectations around the thing. So not only do we create a podcast, and that can be a fictional podcast or a non-fictional podcast, so an audio drama or a traditional podcast, we're also creating around that a series of expectations. And those expectations can come in the form of the expectations that we have for our show, the expectation for what we're going to get out of the show and the creation experience, the expectation for people, how they'll react to our show, expectations for how the show will be received or if it will be received at all. Because it's one thing to put all this time and energy into creating a show and preparing yourself. Okay, I'm going to get 1-star reviews. I'm going to get 1-star reviews. And then what happens is you've prepared to get all these 1-star reviews. Instead, what you get is no reviews. And I think that that's what Davis is talking about here. He went into creating The Viridian Wild, which again, you should check out because it's a great show. He went into creating the Viridian Wild with a lot of expectations. And what he got back was it did not fulfill or even, I think, get close to fulfilling any of those expectations. And a lot of the times when we create something and we are building those expectations around it, we don't know what those expectations even are. So a lot of the time they're unconscious, but at the end of the day, those expectations that we're building will dictate how we end up feeling about the show and the amount of joy and satisfaction that it brings us. I'm going to chug this in hopes that she will stop whining for it. Okay, I'm going to be very hydrated. Okay. So this may or may not resonate with you. But I felt it was important to talk about this, especially because there's this issue of expectations here. But there's also this issue of feeling kind of gross about it. Like Davis talks about feeling competitive, envious, insecure, and really having that dictate not only how you feel about your podcast, but how you see yourself in the world as a creator. And so it becomes wrapped up in your identity. And it's really sort of this strange circular thing because we set those expectations, consciously or unconsciously, we set those expectations. And then the response that we receive fulfills or does not fulfill those expectations. So we've established how we want to feel, and we're in control of how we do feel. But in the middle of that transaction somewhere, I think we get a little bit lost because we don't know how to consciously set expectations that are realistic and manageable. Fun. I know. I feel like there's cat hair on my tea. Just gonna get that out. I feel like I'm like a manager at your annual review, and I'm talking about, the expectations that are set. So Jesse says positive feedback is not written as much as negative feedback. Yeah, a lot of the times when people do decide to leave feedback for a show, they're leaving it at the height of some kind of emotional phase. So I feel like people tend to leave reviews for a show or let the creator know how they feel about something. If it's either a really high experience or a really low experience. So either if they love your show, they want to be like, oh my gosh, I love your show. I share it with all my friends, which is, kind of what we want to hear. But then there's the other side of, this show made me angry. This show made me upset. This show triggered something in my mind that I am reacting against. And there's a lot of negative reasons for people to leave comments that way. And I've talked before in previous live streams about what's called our negativity bias. And that is our tendency to put sort of more weight or more gravitas on reactions or criticisms of our work that are negative. And it all goes back to being, like so many things, like our fear response, like fight or flight. It comes back to survival. Our bodies and our minds tend to remember the negative a little bit more clearly than we remember the positive. So you can get 10 reviews that are all positive. You get one negative review. You're going to remember that negative review word for like the next 7 years. Like I can still quote my 1-star reviews to you, even though I've said they don't dictate who I am. They don't get to identify me. I don't tie up my identity in those things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're just wired to see and understand the negative because survival wise, we need to avoid those things, like, oh, there's poison berries over there. I'm going to remember those berries are poisonous, so I don't eat them and die of berry poison. So, it's again, like fear, it's a survival thing. It keeps you safe, but it also can be really damaging to your ego, especially if you want to move forward with a creative project that you're really passionate about. Let's see. Jesse says you can't measure your success against other people's success either. Yes. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. And he says, hey, if you want insecurities, try being British. Oh no. Being insecure is so fun. Kevin says the idea of creators not getting out what they want from their creation sounds familiar. Yes. So there's just so much going on here. And sorry, I'm scrolling back up to Davis's email here. So I think that what's important here is understanding what your expectations relate to. So when you're setting your expectations for your show, and this can apply whether you've already launched your show, whether you're planning on launching a show, whether you launched your show 7.5 years ago, like you still have expectations around your show. They may have been tempered over time, but you still have expectations. Every time you release an episode, maybe you have a little bit of a burst of hope in your heart that, oh, maybe this is the one that will get me to 10,000 downloads, or maybe this is the episode that will make Oprah give me a call, and, she'll tell me how amazing and smart I am, and that she wants to give me $1 billion to start a TV show. Whatever your expectations are, whatever your hopes are. Joshua says, my manager at Safeway, a grocery store, always told us that one bad experience for a customer negates 10 good customer experiences. Yeah, it's part of the way that we're wired. But I think that understanding that we're wired that way is sort of our first line of defense against letting that keep us from creating or controlling us or controlling how we feel about what we're creating. So, oh my gosh. So really understanding, first and foremost, just even understanding that you have expectations. Like, this is something that when I first started the Right Now podcast in 2015, I didn't know about expectations. I just was really excited that I was creating a show, and I had hopes, and I knew that I had hopes, but I didn't understand how those hopes related to my identity and my behavior as a podcaster, if that makes sense. Like, I hoped that my show would, become famous, like whatever that means, it's not exactly a measurable metric, but I didn't at the time understand that, I have the expectation that this will happen, that this will happen, and that this will happen. And if I don't meet these expectations, I will feel like a failure. I will feel angry. I will feel jealous or envious of other people's shows. And what I want to do when I'm talking about these feelings is not to discount them or shame you for feeling them. I know. Because I have felt them too. I remember, oh boy, years ago, and then even to this day, when I launched Right Now, I would see other shows, other writing shows, getting singled out for, best writing podcasts of 2015, and I wasn't on the list, and it felt terrible. Like, what a terrible feeling. And so part of that terrible feeling relates back to the expectation that my show is just as good as the other shows out there, which your show is probably just as good as the shows out there, but there's all these other factors that keep it from getting added into top 10 lists and all of that other stuff. And that's marketing, and we can talk about that another day. Jeremy says, acceptance from others of your artistic endeavors does legitimize what you do. It does. And I think a lot of our expectations are formed around other people reacting to our work. So what do we do about this? So we have these expectations about the impact our show is going to make on other people. We have all of these expectations about what our show will bring us, whether that's money or fame or a TV deal or a book deal, or even a sense of accomplishment. What do we do about this? I struggled with this for a long time, and I still do. And I still feel, I don't know, I still feel a little bit jealous or envious of other creators when I see a list of like, top 5 sci-fi audio dramas, and Girl in Space isn't on there. Like, and it's funny because at this point, I feel like I shouldn't need that constant validation because Girl in Space has been fairly well received. And it's like, okay, Sarah, you've had your share of validation. Enjoy that. Let that be enough. But one of the problems with the expectations that we set, if we're not clear in our minds with what we expect to get from the experience, then what we get is never enough. Because we get 10 positive reviews, and then the one negative review obliterates those. Or 2 of our other friends who are making podcasts get an award, or make it onto a top 10 podcasts of the current year list, and you're not on there, and you end up feeling gross, and you end up feeling Like, why am I even doing this? And you feel like you're not valid, or like Davis says, competitive, envious, and insecure about my standing in the world. I think that it helps us setting out to do a couple things. And one of the things you've heard me tell you before, I will continue probably during every live stream, I will tell you that it is really critical for your podcast to have a mission statement. And I want you to write it down, and I want it in front of you in your recording studio, in your notebook. It could be a note on your phone. I want you to have in front of you your podcast mission statement. And that mission statement, I think in a future one of these talks, I will go through how to craft your podcast mission statement, because you really need to understand at the heart of a mission statement for your podcast is an understanding of why you create, who you create for. And often that's dual. Often that's you create for yourself, but you also create for, a potential listener. And so understanding who those people are, understanding how you want to serve those people, and understanding what you want to get out of the experience. So that should really be encapsulated by your podcast mission statement. And what that does, having that mission statement in place, or having even just, it can be as formal or informal as you want. You can like embroider it on a hand towel and like put it in your kitchen, or you can scribble it down on the notepad next to you and just have that there. But it's important to remember why you're doing this, because your mission statement will really hold on to a lot of the expectations that you have for what your show is capable of doing and what it actually does. So I really want you to be conscious of some of these expectations that you're setting for your show. And the mission statement will also lay out exactly why you are podcasting and what you want to get out of it. So if in your mission statement, so I'll use the Right Now podcast for an example. The Right Now podcast helps creators to pursue their passion and write. Like that's the mission of the show. That's the point of the show. And every time I get a review or an email from somebody who's listened, who said, oh my gosh, I wouldn't have finished my novel without you, then I know I'm fulfilling my podcast's mission statement. Or for Girl in Space, one component of the Girl in Space mission statement is to help people feel less alone. One of the themes of Girl in Space is isolation. She's out in space, she's isolated. And the show deals with themes of what happens when people come into our lives, whether we want them to or not. How do we react to those people? How do we relate to those people? And then how do we end up relating to ourselves because of the other people around us? And I really love it when I get fan mail or I get a review that says, I feel like I'm hanging out with the main character and I'm not alone. I feel like I have a friend. I feel like I have a found family. Like that's how I know I'm fulfilling my mission statement. So it's important to have that written down so that you're very clear about what success means for your show and what fulfillment means for your show. Jeremy says there's nothing wrong with dividing opinion though, right? If some people love it and some people hate it, then you've won. The worst thing is if people say, yeah, it's okay. I'm such a Seth Godin junkie. So I want to say it was Seth Godin who said, that's how you know you're creating something. When what you've created has the power to divide people like that. When you make something that people love or hate, like, okay, you're making something that has a strong statement that people either love or hate. But, I think that there's a lot of podcasters out there right now, probably who are listening, who are like, oh my gosh, I just want someone to acknowledge that I've made a podcast. Like, I just want somebody to listen. Like, I don't even want my good reviews to outweigh my bad reviews. I would just settle for any reviews because maybe they feel invisible. They feel frustrated. They feel like they've put all this time and energy into something and it's not fruitful. And oh boy, and I feel that too. And again, I said a little bit earlier, that's part of the role of marketing. I think a lot of us creators tend to think of marketing as manipulative or like a used car salesman thing, when really the role of marketing is to bridge the gap between your audience and your product. Well, I'll call it a product, but it's your show. So your audience and your podcast. And marketing just builds a bridge. Marketing is just a little tool that says like, hey, audience, I have a podcast over here that I think you'd really like. Like, oh, now we can meet because we have this bridge of marketing. So marketing is not like necessarily a bad guy. But I think that when we put so much of ourselves into our show, the lack of response to the show can make us feel invisible. It can make us feel I don't know if I want to say worthless, because I don't like to throw that around, but there's just a lot of bad feelings that get caught up in, you have this expectation that you're going to get a reaction to your show, that you're going to get positive reviews, negative reviews, and instead it's just crickets. That's really, really hurtful and really frustrating, because the reason I'm guessing that you started podcasting in the first place was to be heard. And a lack of response can make us feel like nobody's hearing us. And so we're not fulfilling what we set out to do. So when we're talking about some of these negative feelings, there's a few different ways that we can handle them. Joshua says the weird thing is when the downloads and views are there, but the audience engagement isn't there. So audience engagement in this case, meaning like tweets, reviews. Oh, I forgot. I have I keep forgetting I can do this. The weird thing is that when the downloads and views are there, but the audience engagement isn't there, right? And we interpret that in a certain way. So like we interpret that as engagement. So if we don't get any tweets or fan mail, if we don't get fan art, if we don't get, Facebook posts or reviews of how great our show is or how awful our show is, whatever, we tend to equate that with nobody's listening or nobody's getting anything out of my show. And that's an expectation that we set for ourselves as well. Oh yeah, I have a friend who started an audio drama because he wanted to start a conversation. Like that was his podcast mission statement. That was the reason he wanted to do this. He wanted to start a conversation about what happens when XYZ. And he thought that by putting out this audio drama, he would spark this conversation. And while the audio drama was really well reviewed, it got, largely 4 and 5 stars, and it got a lot of reviews, and people followed the Twitter account for it and the Instagram and everything. But nobody was starting this conversation about, oh, do we as humans deserve fundamental freedoms, or like whatever the conversation he wanted to start was. And when that's the expectation upon which our ideas of success or failure are built upon, that can get kind of gross. Tim says, whenever I think about getting crickets instead of an audience, I can't help but think all of the people who've asked me to read their manuscript. And I was just like, I'll get around to it. I'm my own worst enemy. I'm not going to remember who said this, but I'm not going to remember who said this, but someone at some point, and you can quote me on this. So this is the quote, and then it's going to be attributed to someone, at some point, said that nobody is ever going to be as big of an advocate for your work as you. Nobody but you knows the number of hours that you put into crafting this thing. Nobody but you knows that, like, oh my gosh, you forgot to hit record on that episode and you had to redo the entire thing and it was exhausting. Like, nobody knows this stuff. And I think the question here is, do we need to set an expectation that, I don't even know how I want to word this. Do we want to set an expectation that is, oh, maybe I can't expect anyone to listen to my show, or maybe I can't expect, anyone to listen to this. I can't expect to stand out. And it's really hard because we have hopes. When I first launched the Right Now podcast, not gonna lie, I kind of had hopes that like I'd get featured on Good Morning America or Oprah or whatever. But is there a difference between what we hope for and what we can reasonably expect? Kevin says, I think it's recognizing that you're a drop in the ocean of information. And that's hard because I know that in the Seriously Successful Podcasters group that I run in my course Podcast Now, a lot of what I focus on is standing out as a podcaster. Standing out, being seen, being heard, finding true success for your show. And I don't think I ever want to tell people to temper their hopes. What I do want to do is encourage you to set goals that are reasonable and then to work hard at reaching those goals. Because we're talking about two things here. We're talking about success in an objective way and success in a subjective way. And Jeremy Paul Carroll is asking, let me put your comment up here. How are you defining success, right? And that's something we've talked about before here, but it's something I will always continue to talk about because it's so important. Every podcaster defines success in a different way. So for some people, for some podcasters, success is a staircase. Well, it's kind of a staircase for everybody, but the steps on the staircase are what's different. So for some people, success for the first month in which their show is launched, the bar for success is, I want to get 200 downloads in my first month. That's success for them. Or a few steps up that stair, maybe they're 6 months into their podcasting journey, and now their next success goal or their success metric is, I want to get 10,000 downloads this month, or I want to get 50,000 downloads this month, or I want to get 1 million downloads in whatever current year we're in. Or maybe it's not download focused. Maybe like in the case of the Right Now podcast, for a long time, success for the Right Now podcast meant getting 3 pieces of fan mail for every episode that I released from people who listened to the episode and said, oh my gosh, thank you for this. I finished my poem that I was working on because of this, or you inspired me to pick up my pen again and write. There's all sorts of different success metrics. So, and for some people, it's just purely monetary. So, hey, did we hit our goal of making, $3,000 off of this week's episode? Yes, no, okay, how do we adjust? How do we get that? So Tim says you are on TV, just not Oprah yet. I don't even know if Oprah's on TV anymore, to be honest. I'm so out of touch. I know podcasts, I don't know TV. But understanding that you don't need to temper your success. You just need to understand. One of the folks listening on YouTube right now says, the Alan Alda episode was fabulous, and then he started his own. Yes. Alan Alda started his own podcast after he was on my show. I don't know if I can claim like causation. I don't know if correlation equals causation in this case, but sure, I'll take the credit for that. So yeah, so I don't want to tell you to temper your hopes or expectations. What I want you to do is understand what you want out of the show, which is why I suggest making a mission statement. It's why I suggest you write down and just be very clear. Write down in a very clear way, this is what I want from my show. I want to help people. So like, what do you want for other people? And I want this for myself. So I want to make $3,000 an episode, whatever it is that you want to do. And what you want to do, and I teach this in my Podcast Now course, is make that goal, make that success story measurable and realistic. So you can't just say, I want to feel good about podcasting, because it's so amorphous what feeling good is. And what feels good now might not feel good tomorrow. And then it might shift again the next day. Instead, what you want to say is, okay, I want to shoot for one new review this month, or one 5-star review this month on Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you prefer. And what you also want to do in keeping it measurable is you also want to keep it realistic. I've made the mistake before of I'm just going to be very honest with you. I've been in mastermind groups. I've been in like positive thinking groups and situations where they're like, okay, set your goal, now double it. And that's going to be your new goal. So I don't know what I think about that. I think you should keep it realistic at first. And then if you want to like start doubling your goals as you go on. But what happens, what having a goal in front of you does is it gives you something to work toward. Instead of just sitting and feeling kind of garbagey and envious and like you're competing with other people. What you need to do is focus on, what is my next step on my success staircase? What is that? And it can be whatever you want. That's the beauty of it. It can be $10,000 for your episode. It can be $7 for your episode. It can be 20 downloads. It can be 20 million downloads. It can be et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you have to write it down. And you have to understand that there's a path from where you are now and where you want to be. And the trick is, so just like marketing is the bridge between your audience and your show, it's a beautiful connection between those two elements. What is it between, getting my directions mixed up here for how it shows up for you viewers, is where are you now? What do you want? Where do you want to be? What is that invisible string between the two? That's your job. That's your work. That's the hard work. Well, that's part of the hard work of podcasting. And that's part of where marketing and strategy come in, is understanding what's a healthy goal for me to set. Okay, now what are the steps that I need to take to get there? Because the goals themselves are steps. But in between each of those steps, there's like a lot of little steps. Like maybe it's like, oh, a tweet. And oh, a bumper at the end of my show that asks for 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. And maybe this one's a Facebook post. And maybe this is a promo swap with another show. And maybe this one is adding a new tier to my Patreon. I mean, and that's part of it too. Sorry, I'm just going to like talk all night and give you 6 different talks here. But really, when we talk about doing marketing and getting exposure for your show and getting listeners and using marketing to get you from that point A to that point B where you want to be, you have to make sure that the action you're taking is appropriate for where you want to go. Tim says, wait, you're saying I can't have goals and be lazy? I do have to tell you, I don't know if I've ever met like a lazy podcaster. I think we're all pretty hardworking. But no, No, and I'm going to give you homework tonight, you lazy podcasters. I say that with love. No, I'm kidding. I want you to understand what your mission for your show is, what your expectations are for your show. And I want you to understand, or at least start to understand, or start to journal about, or start to talk to your team about what does success mean right now for your show. And again, success is not some kind of like far off finish line. Success is step after step after step. So what's successful for me and Girl in Space right now in this month is not going to be the same thing that I'm like reaching for in 2 years. Joshua Fisher says, yay, homework. Yes, this is good and important homework. So let's see. Oh, I like this. I'm going to put this on here. So when we talk about setting these goals, I have it back there on my shelf. I'm just going to like roll back and get it. If you see my green sweatpants that I'm wearing, don't judge me. So this is a book called Finish by John Acuff, and it's Give Yourself the Gift of Done. And it's for people like me who are procrastinators and who are terrible at finishing what they start. And Jimmy has been reading this and says that in Finish, John Acuff, the author, recommends that you set a goal and then cut it in half. And you keep cutting that goal in half until the little bits and pieces of it are doable. So it's kind of like the staircase where, okay, this is a really big stair to climb. So I'm going to break this up into like 9 little stairs. Yeah, that's a really, really, I'm glad that you brought that up. That's really an important thing. And I should just like leave this out and reread it again. Jimmy also says, I really want to be part of a proper mastermind group. I'm going to write that down because I want to talk about in a later session about forming your own mastermind groups and like what that means. Okay. I like this. I like having ideas for future live streams. So going back to submission and publication, pessimism and cynicism. We've talked a lot tonight about essentially success and goal setting and understanding what your expectations are for yourself and your show. But boy, I had like 9 different questions I was going to go through tonight, but we're just doing the one. So that's cool. In the next just few minutes, I want to talk about some of those negative feelings that you're talking about. And again, to go back, those feelings were feelings of pessimism, cynicism, feeling competitive, envious, insecure about where you're standing in the world, feeling kind of hopeless, like you're creating this and nobody's listening to it or nobody's watching it. And you may have heard me talk before. I don't know if I've done it in a live stream or even for this group, but I talk a lot about scarcity and abundance. And this is not something that I, by any means, have all figured out. This is something that I continually struggle with. And this is a mindset thing. And it's all about how you go into it and how you understand the race that you are running. So, oh man, I'm just like full of quotes tonight. I am not going to be able to tell you. Maybe like it was a Roosevelt maybe who said comparison is the thief of joy. Maybe Thomas Edison. I don't know. Some guy said comparison is the thief of joy. And at the end of the day, you need to be focusing on your expectations for your show, your goals for your show, and what it is you can control. Because what you can't do is control what somebody else is doing. If you think of it as a race that people are running and everybody has their own lane that they're running in, I mean, unless you're going to like sabotage the other people and like put a branch in the way. So please don't do that. Do not sabotage other podcasters. You can't control anybody else's race that they're running. You can only control the race that you're running. So I want you to think about that. You can't control what anyone else is doing. You can only control what you're doing and the way that you feel about it. And if you look at this stuff with a scarcity mindset, so if everything is scarce and you're like, there's not enough listeners to go around, or I don't know. I think that a lot of scarcity comes in when we start thinking about listeners. And there's enough listeners for every show. Now, your show isn't for everyone. Your show's not for every listener, but there's enough listeners out there for your show. There's more people discovering podcasts every single day. And when we talk about running your own race, what we're talking about is not looking at who's listening to other shows. What we're talking about is understanding what's meaningful and fulfilling for you and for your show. Joshua says, why would we sabotage each other? That is messed up. It is messed up. I know. We're a loving community here. Yes. What we want to do is support each other. I think it all comes down to, if you are willing to have a mindset of abundance and not scarcity, and if you look at it not in fear-based terms like, oh, there's not enough people out there who want my show. You know, why am I bother doing this? Everybody likes that other show. And you can even see the expression on my face is I'm closed off. I've turned off any sort of inclination to really understand the problem and work toward a solution for it. But if you have an abundance mindset, if you understand that, yeah, there's a ton of people out there who are going to love your show. There's people out there who want to make fan art, who want to write you fan mail, who want to leave you those 5-star reviews, who want to listen. Keep that in mind as you're working toward your goals. That'll keep you going. I hope that this helped. I keep looking back over at David's question because it's such a good and rich question that Davis has asked. How about you? What do you do when you feel like you're just creating this show and throwing it into the void? Or have you ever felt that way? I know that I felt that way a lot more when I was blogging than when I was podcasting. So those of you who know my story know that I started out as a blogger, and I turned to podcasting because it was I don't know, it was a smaller pond at the time and I wanted to stand out. Let's see. I have a question that says, what was Davis's question? So basically Davis said, I wanted to ask you how it is possible to get past submission and publication pessimism and cynicism. So I'm working hard on making this show. I'm writing characters for people to care about, but I'm putting it out there and I feel like nobody's listening to it. And because of that, I tend to feel envious, competitive, and insecure when I compare myself to other podcasters. So, yeah, I feel like my work is a tree falling in a forest with no one around. And just feeling invisible is a really crappy feeling. So, yeah. I don't know if anybody has struggled with that and what you've done about it. I think that the answer is, again, creating your mission statement, crafting, or I guess understanding what your expectations are for you, for your audience, and then understanding what success means for your show and really sitting down and thinking about what it means for your show to be seen, for your show to be like engaged with, for your show to be heard. So, I think I've talked myself out. I hope you're all having an amazing evening. Jimmy says, I felt that way both as a blogger. Whoops, I did the wrong thing. As a blogger and a podcaster. Sorry, there's Jimmy there. Yeah, it's frustrating, which is why, you have to have a reason for doing it in a way other than it helping you be seen. So there also needs to be a component of, are you enjoying doing this? Every time I do an episode of the Right Now podcast, I feel like I don't know. I almost feel like I'm going to therapy with myself. And it's a way for me to reflect on my own creative process and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So yeah. Okay. I am going to release you for this evening. There is a conversation going on in the comments. That is okay. That I'm like trying to keep on top of here. I want to share this last thought here too from Jimmy, who says, my answer in each case was to quit. I wish I hadn't. I wish I had pivoted, found a new space, and found a way. Quitting is despair. Please make that the last possible choice. Yeah. I know it can seem slow at first too. And I know that Davis with Viridian Wild is a new show. And I know it's really easy when you start with a new show to compare yourself to shows that have been out for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. When I first started Girl in Space, I was like, why am I not as popular yet as the Black Tapes? Well, the Black Tapes have been out for like 10 years. Like, obviously, you grow with time, and sometimes it can feel slower than it should. And Joshua says, slow and steady wins the race. So, I think that it's sort of like, this is the final quote that I'll leave you with tonight. And it's going to be imprecise because it's off the top of my head. There's a saying about the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Understanding that you're putting in that work now so that in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, you will have created a presence that draws engagement and that draws listeners and that sort of gets you to where you want to be. So, okay. That was kind of a hard question. I think I'm also going to do a Right Now podcast episode about this topic. Ryan is saying, why were my messages deleted? They were positive. I'm not sure. I haven't seen your messages, Ryan, so I don't know how to help you with that. I hope that you are all having an amazing evening and that you are enjoying podcasting. And if you would like to continue on this conversation, jump on over to the Seriously Successful Podcaster Facebook group. Sorry, my brain is just like fizzling. And let's continue the conversation there under the live stream. Yeah. All right. Enjoy your evening, and we will do this again soon. Bye for now.